Hello, hello. You are here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Careers in Sound Design. We have a poll that we want you to take. Hopefully you can see that on your screen. Welcome for those of you who are just joining us. Thank you. Welcome to Careers in Sound Design. We're starting out with a poll. So as you're coming in, we hope you see it on the screen. We just want to get a sense of who's in the room today and what you hope to get out of our program. All right, we got 85% of you who have filled out the poll. Can we get it up to 100? We get up to 100. We have a few holdouts. That's okay. All right. And we're at 100%. Awesome, awesome. Before we close the poll, we're going to see if we have anyone else coming in. I also would like to direct your attention to the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. After we conclude our conversation, that is where we will be taking questions from the audience. All right. So we have one more minute on the poll. It's kind of odd, I'm sure, that this year in the sound workshop with absolutely no sound, but I just run the webinars. Like I'm a visual person. But yes, we see you out there, and we hope that you see the Q&A at the bottom. Cool. And we thank you for everyone that is on time. We're going to give another minute and just give an opportunity for other people to come in. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're gonna put our poll results on the screen. So hopefully you all can see that. So a good number of you are freshmen and seniors. So we have a really nice mixture. And then we have our sophomores and juniors. We also have some alums, great to see you. So a number of you want to launch your careers in Chicago, which is great. Our panelists today come from a variety of different markets. And we are mostly cinema and TV, but we have a gaming person, hello, good to see you, and a few people in audio and music. So great. So great to see everybody. All right. So I am Shaka Reeves. I am the career and internship advisor for the Cinema and Television Arts Department. So this program is a part of our summer build-up series, Careers in Sound Design. We have a really great panel of people to talk with you about careers, and I'm super excited. But I'm also really excited about our student hosts. We have James Snead, who is an audio major, and Jessica Jurewicz, who I hope I said your last name correctly. Am I in the neighborhood?
Yeah, that
kind
sounded
of. I did it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and she's one of our amazing cinema students. And I think even just in our co-hosts, we have a really great sense of just the broad section of what careers in sound design can take over. It's sound, it's interactive, it's cinema and TV. And we just hope that you get a whole lot out of this, and you also become aware of all the career avenues that are available to you. I want to quickly thank the partners on the Free Summer Film School series. So that is my department, the Career Center, Cinema and Television Arts. Eric Scholl and Sandy Cooperson have been amazing. The Alumni and Development Office, Sarah Schroeder, and Semester in LA, Karen Loop. Please look out and stay to the end because we have even more events next week to share with you all. So without further ado, I am turning it over to James and Jessica.
Thanks so much, Shaka. So yeah, we have a great event planned for you guys. My name is James Snead. I am a senior audio design and production student, and I am also the president of the Audio Engineering Society Student Chapter. I'm really excited to be here. I'm all about collaboration and looking forward to our conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm about to be a junior at Columbia, and my major is editing and post-production, but I am mainly focusing on sound design because that is my passion. And you can also find me at the audio suite because I work there a lot during the semester.
So before we jump into our Q&A with the panelists, I just want to take some time to introduce these wonderful, amazing, talented panelists that we have today. So our first panelist is John Wong. John is a senior sound designer and re-recording mixer at Periscope Post and Audio in Chicago. He's been in the film industry for over 15 years and has worked on award-winning films like Come As You Are, Pooh, The Derrick Rose Story, Signature Move, and has also worked on high-profile commercials for BMW, Red Bull, and Formula One racing. Our second panelist is Brielle Achterhoff. Brielle works as an audio engineer at Vubiquity out in LA and freelances in her spare time. She has experience in sound design for film, video games, TV shows, and has worked as a sound editor on popular kids shows, including Disney's Muppet Baby and Tots. And our third panelist, Paxton Helgeson. Paxton began his career right here in Chicago, working on commercial post-production. He now works as a sound designer out in Washington at Bungie and has worked on titles such as Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Halo Infinite, and Destiny 2. So thank you all so much for being here, and we are honored to have you share your time and your wisdom with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess we can start delving into some of the questions we have for you. Since you guys are all graduates from Columbia, we'd like to know what your experience was like at Columbia and what you majored in at Columbia. John, do you want to start?
Sure. When I graduated back in 2002, there wasn't much of a film department in the AAA. It was mainly, I think it was like an AVM 1 and 2, and that was basically it. Everything else was more music related. I went into music originally, then I really realized really fast I don't have enough skill set to be a composer in Chicago because playing the acoustic guitar just wasn't good enough. Then obviously I have a love for movies, and I noticed there were some post-production classes, so I decided to go into that, and I really loved just creating sounds and everything. That's how I got into it a bit. I believe the concentration was audio for the visual medium at the time. I'm not sure if that changed. But like, I think the most important thing for me that I learned was signal flow. I think that'll carry you in audio in general, in whatever aspect of the industry you're in, whether it's film, television, game, audio, or anything else at that point. So that's one thing, that's probably the most important thing that I learned.
All right, well, I guess I'll continue.
My name's Brielle, and I graduated in 2018 with a bachelor's in audio design and production. And so that was in the AAA department. Unfortunately, I found out my sophomore year that I was super passionate with audio for visual media. When I took production 2, they have like a final project that's like you get to sound design a commercial, and so I just fell in love with it. And so I panicked and I was like, what do? I had gone to the counselors and said, is there a major for me? Do I have to switch my major? Did I lose all these courses that I've already taken? And they said, no, you can take an undeclared concentration in audio for visual media, basically. And so how that worked was based on the level that I was in with ADP, I could test out of the lower level classes in the cinema, television, and arts program for the sound classes and take some of the higher up ones that were more delve into sound for picture and post-production audio, stuff like that. So I got a little bit of both worlds. It was kind of nice because the AAA department was definitely very technical, a lot on signal flow that I learned. One of my favorite classes is like recording 2, and then audio for visual media. And then I would say like the cinema department was definitely more that like aesthetics of film and getting into like how to design sounds. I really enjoyed the post-production audio 3 class. I also took some location sound classes that were really cool. So, yeah.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. My name is Pax. I am a 2015 AVM graduate from Columbia. I actually, kind of like John, I initially wanted to go to school to do music. So I went to community college first, but I realized, okay, this isn't what I want to do. But I've always loved film. So I decided to go to Columbia with concentration working on sound for picture. And again, I decided to change my mind at Columbia. I was like, actually, I want to do games now. So midway through is when I discovered Wise. Actually, some of the first classes in the AAA department, we did some like sound replacements in a Unity project. And it was after that, I'm like, okay, like there's actually a career for me in games doing audio. That's really cool. So I continued going through the audio for visual media program. Some of the best courses I took were probably Michael Coyle's AVM classes, which were excellent. Coyle is amazing. And listen to him because he will do great things for you and teach you a lot. So yeah, those were great. And then Diego Trejo's post-production classes, PPA 1 and 2, were also phenomenal. So those two, I think, were some of my favorite experiences at Columbia, along with, you know, Benj Cantors and who else? Ted Uzzle was always a character too. Love Ted. So yeah, all amazing professors and courses that I think really helped prepare me to kind of like set me up for success after graduating.
That's so cool, guys, to hear how, you know, you started doing one thing, and as you took classes and got more exposed to different, you know, industries or different things you never thought of before, your passions developed while you were, you know, still in school. And to see kind of where you are now has come from that. That's really awesome to see.
Yeah, I feel like everyone really has to go through that journey. You start college thinking you're going to go into one thing, and then your perspective completely switches around when you just take that one class that you realize like, wow, I really love doing this.
Yeah, and part of the journey, as we know, is interning, right? So you don't always get a job right away, pretty much never. And so we were wondering if you could each tell us just kind of where you interned, whether that was during school or right after you graduated, and what about that internship helped prepare you to get to that first big job. So making that transition from, okay, I'm no longer looking for internships, I'm looking for jobs. How did that transition look?
I interned at 2 places. Both don't exist anymore. But one was a jingle house at the time where I did a lot of client services, but also databasing their libraries of samples and everything at the time. And then the other one was where I actually got hired after a certain point, called Avenue Edit. They were probably one of the biggest post houses in Chicago at the time. I interned there for a semester, I basically was there 5 days a week just because I only had one class left, and it was more of like an independent project. I'm not sure if they still have those things anymore. But I was there 5 days a week, got to know the audio department pretty well. You know, I was one of those people that just did everything, whether it was, you know, all the getting the coffees, the lunches, cleaning, but also I made sure I had time to actually get to learn some of the software they were using. Because one of the things that was different was they weren't on Pro Tools, which is very different. So I got to learn stuff from there, asked a lot of questions. And unfortunately, they didn't have a job opening at the time, so I went out and freelanced. I did a lot of production, so I did a lot of location sound. And then like a year later, they called me back saying, hey, we have a job opening. You want to come in for an interview?
What program did they use other than Pro Tools? So was that your first time learning something other than?
Yeah, they had a Fairlight at the time. I think now that's integrated into DaVinci. And then another it was called a DSP. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was called DSP, but it's something that's not around anymore, I don't think. And then we switched to, at one point, Paramix. I think that's still around. And then Nuendo. Like, I think at the time that was 2.0 or something.
Gotcha, that's interesting. How many times you have to switch through different programs and learn something new? Yeah,
I mean, like learning, I had to relearn Pro Tools 4 years ago because of where I am now at Periscope. It was a big change for me. I can't believe they haven't changed anything with certain things. And I was like, so in essence, it was great to really just learn Pro Tools again, in a sense that I knew most of it because a lot of key commands and the way it functioned never changed. But there were obviously, I got to retrain my mind to use the hotkeys and everything else.
And Paxson and Brielle, how about you guys?
So my junior year, I interned at Air U Chicago, and they're more of like a commercial, like ad, radio spots place, but they do some like, I know they did some short films when I was there too. My senior year, I interned at Periscope actually, and
connection.
We got to explode a microwave with a sledgehammer for recording sound effects. It was fun. And then after that, basically I graduated in December of 2018, and I knew I wanted to move to LA. So I started just like looking for what are some like opportunities. And I have a lot of like passion for sound for animation. And basically I found this company with my mentor called Boombox Post that basically all they do is just TV animation. And so I applied to it, and they only take 2 applicants a season, you know? And so I called, and I flew out actually. I did the interview in person, and they basically tell you that day, because you only get a week to move your whole entire life across the country. So a lot of people don't usually apply from out of state, but I really wanted to move to LA, so it was just kind of huge, just taking that big stride and that like leap of faith kind of thing. But basically how I kind of like transitioned was just like working a lot on side projects through college and just trying to produce a portfolio, just having work experience, like trying to do as much collaborative work with either students or even just kind of like low-end freelance, like independent films was like something I really strive to do.
Yeah, it's really encouraging that you, oh, I'm sorry, Paxson. I was just going to say that's really encouraging that you took the leap and went out there and did that, even if there wasn't certainty. I think, you know, a lot of us in Chicago might look to other states to get jobs, and, you know, there's a lot here, but there's certain industries in other areas. So that's cool that that worked out for you, and very encouraging to me as well as other students I know. Sorry, I cut you off, Paxson.
No, that's okay. I could not do that move in a week. I moved out to LA from Chicago and then up to Washington, and a week just sounds terrifying to me. Yeah, but I didn't do any internships when I was in school. Probably should have, but I didn't. And that's okay if you don't either, just to let you know. But after graduating, I interned at a post house called Cutters. They actually have a sound department called Another Country. So that was a great experience. I got some good insight into the post-production workflow and how that interacts with different departments like VFX, animation, film editing, stuff like that. So a lot of it was mostly client service stuff, you know, your typical lunch runs and setting up for sessions with clients, things like that. But they also had some opportunities where I could sit in on sessions. I did some spotting sessions for a film that they were doing post for at the time. So while it was typically just mostly a post-production house for commercials, they also did take some films and things like that. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of video game opportunities in Chicago, unfortunately. So that kind of goes back into, you know, you might have the prospect of moving long distance for a job. So that's my first job. I moved from, first job after school, I was working in post-production for commercials too. So after my internship, I worked at this place called We Are Unlimited, which was related to DDB Chicago, which is a big advertising agency. So I was the in-house sound designer for all of McDonald's North America, which was kind of interesting. We did all of their social media stuff. So things that you'll see on like Instagram, all the ads, sponsored posts, things like that, or like the YouTube free rolls that you'll get the advertisements before YouTube videos. So we did a lot of that stuff, a lot of radio, things like that. So yeah, that was in Chicago because there wasn't a lot of game stuff going on, which is what I really wanted to do. Seems like there's a lot of post-production work in Chicago specifically around ads. So that was a market that's definitely worth looking into. And also kind of a good way that got me to where I am now in games. It was kind of like a good jumping off point where I built up some experience first and then have opportunities where you can move somewhere else to a different market if you're interested in that.
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing from everybody is that internships gains experience, and that experience allows you to take advantage when those opportunities present themselves. And oftentimes you seek out those opportunities. John, you mentioned you were sought out by another company, but being ready for that when the time comes is really important. And those internships and side gigs and freelance all help in that. Our next question in regards to internships, or I guess our last question in regards to like internships and jobs for right now is, what were some skills or patterns of behaviors that you guys adopted or continued to practice throughout your career as you grew? Like, let's say from starting to your first internship to where you are now, you got to where you want to be. What were those things that you continuously did that helped you get that next opportunity, that made you more attractive than the next applicant to get hired? What sort of advice or wisdom do you have for us that you've learned that's worked for you? And this is for everybody. So jump in, Brielle, if you'd like to start us out. I see you're thinking over there.
Yeah, so like I guess a continuation of my story would be when I started interning out in LA, it was nice because it was really flexible. It wasn't every day, so I could still work on the side, freelance, and do stuff, make money. And then basically there was an opportunity that arose at the company. They said, we are short-staffed. Can you please help us sound design this? Like, you'll get paid for it. And it was only like, because they work on 22-minute animation, so I think I was working on half of it. I split it with a different designer. Like, they had seen that I was capable enough to handle the job, so I did it, got paid for it, and this was only like maybe 2 months into the internship, and I was supposed to be there for 4 or 6 months, I can't recall, but basically they immediately hired me after that. And so I had freelanced for them for over a year. And basically, I guess my advice would just be always prove that you're an asset. Like, in any way, show your strengths in some sort of capacity. Like, if you're really good at, testing out mics, or you can solder and make cables, just somehow in a, respectful way, bring it up, and always I feel is good to find like a balance, because I think one of my biggest strengths and biggest weaknesses at the same time is that I'm a big perfectionist, and just trying to find a balance between like, oh, it's good enough, and like you're putting all your heart and soul into it, but especially with stuff like TV where it's you only get 5 to 7 days to usually like work on it, you have to do it in that time allotted, where independent and freelance is a little bit more flexible with the time stuff. Yeah. And I guess putting on a smile and like just like everyone's collaborating, like you can always just rely on your coworkers for advice and help with sound designing, and just you know, being friendly.
I like that.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to like the patterns of skills and stuff, how it's developed, I mean, it's just about repetition, right? Or practicing on different type of media that you have, you know. I mean, you know, in Chicago, you have to do a lot, especially in the commercial world. You have to do everything pretty much on your own. You might have an assistant, but they're mainly there to prep things or take voiceover logs or whatever else, you know. As I've transitioned into just film and television and some gaming work the last X amount of years, I've kind of like transitioned those skills over where I can do a dialogue edit. I can be the sound designer or the Foley or anything else, or cutting backgrounds or whatever else. I think it's good to be well-rounded, but like it just depends on where you're going to be. If you're out in LA, most likely you're going to be specialized a little more, whether it's a sound editor or a sound designer or dialogue editor, ADR mixer, so you know, I think it's good overall to know everything in sound editing. But you know, definitely it just depends on where you're going to move to. As like Brielle said, you know, she's mainly cutting sound effects. You know, you don't do the sound effects and do all the dialogue recording for an animation or anything, and then cutting it. So that's a little different. But definitely practice. You know, try new things. You know, think outside the box. You know, just like, you know, if you're messing with a EQ, just completely like just create crazy, you know, cues and everything, and just see what it does. And, you know, you never know what type of sound comes out of it, you know.
Yeah, kind of tied into what John mentioned. The two things that I've kind of been following for the last several years as I've progressed in my career is to fail fast and to fail often. And it's that you just make mistakes all the time. You realize what doesn't work. And sometimes you stumble on new things that do work with sound design. In fact, a lot of the happy accidents I have are with like just abusing plugins that weren't supposed to be used in the way that they're supposed to, like using OTT and stacking 10 instances of it on one track and just playing stuff through it. And it's just like this distortion garbage, and it can sound really cool for like a creature that's mechanical or something like that. So you find that when you kind of think outside the box and use tools in unique and interesting ways, that you arrive at a place that you wouldn't typically if you were more reserved and went things by like a very rigid, like normal signal flow way of working. So that's been kind of a liberating thing for me, is just taking chances on things, realizing what doesn't work, and just quickly, you know, not getting hung up on it and just quickly moving on to the next thing. So that's just kind of like a principle or philosophy that I've been looking at for the past couple of years. But one thing I think through my internship and my first job doing stuff for commercials is, because I wanted to transition into games, is to just always be working on the side to get to where you want to be. You know, if you're, you know, working a day job that isn't in audio, you know, in your time off, work on your reel or design some sounds for your portfolio and stuff. It's just always be practicing at your craft, because a lot of times people don't, you know, they graduate from school and they kind of let their skills and their craft kind of fall by the wayside a little bit and hope that something lands in their lap. But, you know, it's unfortunate that the industry is super competitive and you have to always be working at it. But I think that's really how you kind of develop as a sound designer and kind of move forward and present yourself in the best light for opportunities.
And you did talk about before how you used stock plugins and tools instead of more expensive programs such as maybe Pro Tools, and how that can help students when they graduate is using what they have at hand versus thinking they need like the top quality program or top quality tools at their expense.
Absolutely. I think one of the issues I had too when I graduated is like, I need to have Pro Tools and I need to have these expensive, shiny, I need Waves Diamond bundle, you know, you don't need that stuff.
The Black Friday special.
Exactly. Yeah. Which when I graduated, Waves Diamond was like $3,000. Now it's like 500. So it's like, it pays to be frugal and, you know, save. You know, by not buying plugins, they will eventually go on. So don't buy something because it's on sale, because you think you need it. You don't actually need it. It's just on sale. It'll be on sale again. But yeah, that's one of the issues I had is like, I want to be competitive with these post houses, or as a freelancer, I need to have the best plugins to be taken seriously. And that's not true. You know, instead of, you know, dropping money every year on a Pro Tools perpetual license or buying it outright, I switched over to Reaper. You know, it's $60 for a personal license. John is probably sick of all my Reaper talk. That's all we do on Twitter.
Reaper. I love Reaper.
I'm one of those guys that talks about Reaper a lot. But yeah, it's a cheap, you know, software comparatively to other DAWs, and it's incredibly customizable. So if you're used to Cubase or Nuendo, just set up your hotkeys and macros to be exactly how you want it to be. So if you're going into a post house and you plan to work on film and stuff like that, that might not be the best advice, because in that environment, you know, you're all going to use Pro Tools because you have parity from other studios, recording sessions, things like that. But if you're doing something, if you want to do sound design, you can design all of your assets in Reaper and then just send your splits and bring them into Pro Tools. You know, that's an option. That's what David Farmer does and the Skywalker guys. So that's always an option too. But yeah, learn the stock plugins in whatever DAW you're using. You know, they're incredibly powerful, and they'll teach you the fundamentals and kind of the basics and what you can do with them. And then you'll realize like, oh, I wish it could do this. And then you'll maybe be at a point like, oh, maybe now I should be buying plugins. But don't buy them just to buy them, because that's a waste of money.
Yeah, and just tagging on what Pax said, you know, definitely learn your stock plugins. And, you know, obviously from Pro Tools to Reaper to Nuendo, their stock plugins are very different and even more vast when it comes to Reaper and Nuendo when it comes to stuff. You know, Nuendo has instruments and randomizers and whatever else, and you know, Reaper has very similar stuff. One thing to also know is once you mastered your stock, look at free plugins. There's tons of free plugins out there that can do amazing things. Yep. Even, you know, I mean, some of the top brands out there, whether it's, you know, Isotope has a free stereo imager, you know, just to, you know, sterilize a mono file. That's free. It's great. I use it all the time. Valhalla has some great plugins when it comes to reverbs and delays. They're all free. Take advantage of, you know, whatever free plugins are out there that companies are offering, and then master those as well.
Not just plugins, but sound effects. If you're doing anything, invest in free sound effects. There's so many. I'm actually a part of this one called Boom Library that monthly they send me free samples of whatever bundle they're doing. So like, I don't know, I think this month was something about like metal hits, but in the past I've gotten like dog sound effect bundles. It's like usually like between 5 and 10 free sounds, and that stuff adds up. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. And not just that, but also, you know, with as far as like library effects go, like getting some sort of like Tascam or Zoom kit and just starting to record your own, like going out whenever you're in public places, like record your own walla and your own backgrounds for anything. There's a lot of ways to get around having to buy libraries, because those get expensive too.
Yeah, I mean, I carry a portable recorder wherever I go. You never know.
That's really good advice to us all. And I really like what you guys are all saying too about like leveraging what you have and kind of mastering that before you decide to go and buy all these other things. And then on top of that, you embrace like your uniqueness. So as you hone your skills and leverage all these free tools that we have at our disposal, you kind of find your niche and what you're great at. And Brielle, you mentioned this earlier, like embracing that and kind of like putting that forward, especially when you're looking at internships or jobs, is a way to stand out, and clearly a way you guys have all, you know, climbed up the ladder and gotten to be where you are and gotten the jobs you want. Is you've done that. You've embraced your uniqueness, you've leveraged what you had, and you've grown from there. So it's really encouraging to kind of hear that consistency from all three of you kind of share that.
It's really cool too with the sound effects libraries. I know a lot of the engineers I meet out here, or even in Chicago, like they're always willing to share their own personal library. So if you like stock up on like all of your own home recordings, or just take a minute and go through like some of your old films and you built this cool robot build or whatever it was, bounce those out, use those again, and like use them as layers, and now you have an arsenal to choose from that's even more personal for you, but also you can have a great networking opportunity with other fellow engineers who are so willing to share their own personal libraries if you're willing to share yours.
Well, you mentioned networking, Brielle, so maybe we can talk about some ways or strategies you guys use to network during college, and like how that helped you succeed after college.
I was horrible at networking, truthfully. I was a bit of an introvert, and I think I had to learn on the job. I mean, I literally couldn't pick up a phone and just say, "Hi, this is so-and-so from this company." That's how bad I was with it. And I remember specifically the engineer, one of the engineers I assisted, you have to work on your talking and your people skills. Which I don't understand how I got hired at that point if they said that to me. But I like when it comes to networking, I mean, you know, go to events, you know, whether, you know, if you're in Chicago, there's used to be a lot of events going on pre-COVID, but like just get in contact with other audio people, you know, it's, you know, whether on social media or, you know, just people from your class or even from another school, you know. I think when you networking with other people within audio, I think it helps build your creative skills, because you guys can feed off each other, but also go out there and, you know, when it comes to networking, look for jobs out there. You know, there's lots of indie films in Chicago. I mean, at some point they're going to need post, you know, so look out for them, you know, go to other schools like DePaul has a really good film program as well. And they do a lot of films, and, you know, they need a sound person, you know, reach out somehow, you know, go through some of their film events, or even Columbia's film events, you know, look for those filmmakers, those directors and producers, and see if they need post help, and take advantage of the studio equipment at school since you're still there. Because, you know, as long as it's okay, I'm not sure how the rules work, but, you know, definitely like take advantage of the equipment you have at school and try to do these independent projects.
I guess I'll take it away. So I think a really good way to network yourself is on Facebook. I'm such a huge advocate with like having your own Facebook, and there's just so many group pages that you could add yourself that are either the Chicago film industry, like you could just search Chicago film, or you could search LA film, or I even add myself to a bunch. When I was in school, I added myself to all of the Illinois film schools, and I would just find like students like, I need help on this like 6-minute like project, I need sound post, and like their department, maybe they just don't have a lot of people interested in sound. And like that's where I made a lot of great connections from other schools, taking the time to like reach out even in college to people I had no idea like existed. And another good thing I would say is like keeping up with those contacts. Like it's good to try and reach out to them, you know, and just see like, how are you and what are you working on right now? Like just even showing an interest. Like I sometimes will go to like different people's screenings or just kind of support them to show that I still care and appreciate their work, even if I'm not involved with it. But my other great one would be, I don't know if Manifest, like how it's working with COVID, but what I would do in college, every semester Manifest, since I had such a passion for sound, for animation specifically, I would always go to the screenings for all the animatics that were not ready necessarily for like, it was like the storyboards that they were presenting. So those were the kids that next semester they were gonna Mead post. So I always found people I wanted to work with. I was like, oh, this one, you know, there was this one girl who did this spooky like witch one, and I was just so like drawn into the story and just the character designs. And I basically approached her after the Manifest and say, hey, I'll design it for free. You know, I'm a student and I want to work on it and I'm passionate. She's such a good friend of mine. We've worked on a lot of things together now. It's a good way to kind of like look out. Again, with COVID and Manifest, I'm not sure how that's going to flow, but I'm sure there's still like opportunities to do something like that.
Totally. As both John and Brielle mentioned, you know, if you make those networking and expand your network, you will get return work from those people sometimes too. So I ended up doing, when I was a student at Columbia, I worked on a DePaul student's film because they don't have a huge sound department. So I did a short film for him. And then after we graduated, he moved off to LA. I was still in Chicago, but he kept sending me work. He's like, hey, I got something else for you. Do you want to do a music video I just shot? I'm like, sure. Yeah, totally. So it's like, as soon as you kind of build these networks with specifically other people that are super hungry and doing work like crazy, directors are great people to know because they're always working and doing stuff that needs sound. But yeah, so that's always an opportunity. I saw there were some people interested in game audio in the chat too. Another thing is look up your local IGDA chapter, which is Indie Game Developer Association. Every major city has one, and they have local events where you can go to, and they're usually like at a bar or something. You just meet people, hang out, people from a bunch of studios come together and talk about games. And sometimes it's not just audio people, it's like programmers and, you know, graphic artists, VFX people, designers. You talk about games and stuff. And it's not always necessarily knowing audio people that will get you a job, because I mean, kind of your competition in a way. Audio people aren't going to hire you for a job unless it's like a massive film that needs a bunch of editors and designers on it. But when you're starting out, typically you want to know people that aren't audio people, because those are the people that will need your support and need your work. So that's a good one just for in-person networking, but also social media is great too. Twitter has a massive audio community where we just talk all day, a lot of it nonsense and super, you know, very unproductive nonsense, but a lot of it is good stuff about audio where we talk about the gear that we use and different tips and tricks, and we're sharing the work that we're doing on, like, one of my friends at Naughty Dog was just sharing The Last of Us 2, his system that he built for dynamic breathing for characters and how it reacts to different states and how fast you're running. So he detailed this entire system in like a 12 tweet thread, like videos. So it's awesome. So if you're not on Twitter, you should be, and add me on there and we could talk about audio stuff.
Yeah, and just another one, like Slack is another great kind of social media aspect where people just talk about, say, like game audio or film sound or stuff like that. That's another great medium. I mean, that's how I met Pax on Twitter, you know, via Twitter. Yep. So, and
I think I met Brielle on Instagram or something too. So it's like,
I think so.
It's huge for networking. In fact, I knew a girl that got a job at Facebook because somebody at Facebook liked her reel on Instagram. Crazy. So yeah, just, be active, post your work as much as you can online, because somebody will see it potentially and hire you for it.
Wow. That's a lot of great information on that. I do have a follow-up question. So you mentioned like knowing your audience is really important, and who you're trying to pitch yourself to or work with. That might not always be the people that are like you. They're going to be different, and trying to find creative ways to kind of build those relationships, and one of them being through social media. I'm curious, if you guys have done this, or if you would recommend this, if we're thinking about as students, like building ourselves up and like creating a website, getting our social media platforms, if we are interested in multiple like industries, I guess. So let's say we're interested in doing film sound design, but then also video game sound design. Do you, like in your experience, have you had separate accounts for that? Like you use Facebook for film, but you use Twitter for games? Or would you say you post everything to everything? Or are you more specific and choosy with what content you send to people when you're like looking for a gig or to build that network?
I definitely feel like any type of job or anything you're sending personally someone, you should definitely curtail that solely to what that job is. Don't be sending a game audio person some film. I mean, I guess you could theoretically, but really you want to show your game stuff, and vice versa with film. So I would say, you want to curtail your content for kind of job applications or internship stuff, but I feel like definitely making a website's a great asset, especially because you can have tabs where it's like film work, it could say video game work, you can kind of go through it, maybe even making a YouTube channel and like having playlists. There's different options, so it's a good idea to kind of curtail for job and internship stuff, but more like have a broad spectrum, I guess, on your own social media and websites.
I totally agree with that. In fact, I really sucked at this at first. I was terrible. I was applying to hundreds of game studios, sending them short films I did in school. And I was wondering why I didn't get callbacks. And that's the thing. It's like, if you're hiring for a job, you want to look at a candidate and envision them in that role, right? And I think one of the most important things to do is I had 3 different reels at one point. I had an advertising reel, a film reel, and game audio. And they were all different. And because at the very beginning, they were all kind of crammed together. And when I would send it off, people would be like, okay, what does he really want to do? I see a lot of film stuff and a little dabbling in games. Like, what are they really interested in? And sometimes it can come across like you are not very focused and that you're kind of scatterbrained and not really honed in on anything in particular. But at the same time, I think it's important to have those separate reels and it tailored, but like still be interested in all that stuff and still like work on it. And that's what's going to make you well-rounded and valuable when you do get the job, because then they're going to be like, okay, well, this person can do Foley and dialogue, and then they can also implement sounds in the game because they're technical. Like, that's a pretty useful skill set to have. So I think it's super important to develop all these skills, but definitely focus in when you're applying for jobs and showing the material that represents what that job is looking for the best out of the material that you've done. And sometimes if a job posting has gone up and I'm like, I need to work on my reel quick. So one thing I did in the past, and a lot of people do, is they'll just download a trailer or a cinematic from YouTube and just strip the audio out of it and just do a redesign of it. So just re-record your own source or use library stuff and get really designy with it and make something for your reel. And you have to always kind of like put a disclaimer, like, this is not my work, this is a redesign.
Yeah.
So that's important. So people are like, okay, you didn't actually work on this World of Warcraft cinematic, like you just graduated.
That's like game changing though, to know that we can do that, because I think a lot of us feel like, oh, we need to have all this content for a reel. And maybe we are scrounging and trying to find directors and video game people to actually get like original work. But then, like you just said, Pax, like to be able to do a redesign and that's acceptable in the industry as like a showcase of what you can do, that's like a game changer, because now you, like you said, you create content for your own reel. And obviously original content on like real projects is probably more attractive, especially if you're going for like bigger positions later in your career. But for us students just getting started, I feel like that you just dropped like a mind bomb. Like that is awesome that we can do that. I never even thought of doing that before.
Absolutely.
Good practice too. Like I think Pax was saying, like, don't like get like lazy once you graduate. If you have nothing to work on and you can't get projects right now, then just do that, you know, in your spare time.
I mean, like for me, like during, you know, COVID, when everything shut down, I had a lot of free time in my hand because I wasn't in the studio, and I was like, I haven't done a lot of sci-fi in a while. I decided to rip some of the Avengers Infinity War stuff, and I just redesigned the whole thing, you know, just the, you know, practice, because that's one genre that I don't get to do a lot of thrillers, dramas, and comedies and stuff, and sometimes action movies, but like the sci-fi stuff is very limited in Chicago, and I'm still interested in stuff like that, and I'll just rip something and just redesign it.
That's another thing I did. Oh, sorry, Jessica.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask, how often do you guys typically update your reels, or how often should we update our reels? And do you always contain and put new content in there, or do you include, if something was like a really great thing that you've done from like a year ago, do you keep that in there and add a few new things, or do you like completely start over?
I have some stuff on my reel that's probably a little over a year or two, only because I think the content is good. As long as it feels dated and it's something that's unique within your reel that sticks out, I think it's okay to leave in there. It doesn't matter how old it is, as long as it represents the type of skills you have currently. But definitely, you know, if you're working on new content constantly, definitely update it. If it's, you know, don't just update a reel just to update it, but if it's content that's good to showcase, do it, you know.
Yeah, I don't personally like update it like every day, but I would say on my own website, I just have like a bunch of links to samples of work I have. So if anyone just wants to just check out like any of the films I've worked on, like I usually like will just export like 1 minute clips of like 30 seconds or like 15-20 seconds of my favorite parts of like sound design, and then it's like a little compilation, and it's not like infringing on just posting the whole video of somebody else's. But I'll do that for the website, and as for the reel, it's more, I guess, you know, sending it personally to other people. If it's something I'm like looking for a dialogue position, maybe I'll send them more of my dialogue work. And if it's sound design, all my sound design work, I wouldn't be scared though to put older stuff, unless like if it's good, it's good, you know.
Yeah, I don't think there should be like a time limit on any work you've done. If you did cool stuff while you're in school, of course, have it in there. Totally. If it represents like your level of your craft and stuff, always have that in reel. Totally. I am really bad right now at updating my reel just because I've been constantly crunching for the last 2 years, so that's fun. But ideally, I would have my reel updated. Like a lot of people do it when they're applying for jobs actively. Like when you've decided, okay, I'm going to be looking for a job in the next couple months, I should keep my reel. I should get it to where it needs to be. Yeah, I think also important to note is the ideal reel length for sound design stuff is about 1 minute and some change. I've seen a lot of people have sent me like 5-minute reels. Realistically, if you're applying for a gig, that gig is probably getting hundreds of other applicants. So the hiring manager, a senior sound designer, or a sound design lead will not be able to watch 500 5-minute reels. They're going to listen to the first 15 seconds and make a determination like, I'm going to pass or not. So keep your reels very short, because that will make it much more likely they will watch the entire thing, which is huge.
Yeah, when I applied to my internship at Boombox, they required me to have a reel that was only 30 seconds long. So that was the hardest thing ever to do. Just chop it all up. So hard.
It's really hard. Yep. You got to keep it short and sweet so they'll watch the whole thing, because that'll keep a good impression of you in their mind too. If they decided to skip on you, you're probably not going to get a call back, which is a bummer. But that's why we're talking about this stuff, because it's important for people. You know, you want to set yourself up for success, and knowing these kind of like technical things. Like nobody taught me that in school. Like, this is how long your reel should be. You're just like, yeah, you got to have a reel. It's like, okay, how long is my reel supposed to be? So
Yeah.
that's something that's important to know. It's like, keep your reel short, have your name bookending it, like you're a little designy thing, like Paxton Helgeson. Mine has like this like digital thing going on that I sound designed for. So it's like, you know, make it cool little 2-second intro, short reel, bookend it with your name and website at the end. And that's enough, you know, have 3 or 4 short clips in it, 15 seconds a piece-ish. Yeah.
Okay, well, do you guys have any other last things to say to the students? Any other pieces of wisdom you'd like to share before we move on to the Q&A from the audience?
I was gonna say, as a fellow woman in audio, there's not as many of us, but I feel like we are definitely growing, and it's just a really cool shout out to look into programs that either support women in audio or just like provide us opportunities. And one of them I would say is, it's called WAM, Women in Audio Mission. And then there's Sound Girls, and a new book, I actually wrote it down because I just ordered it on Amazon. It's called Women in Audio. It's by Leslie Gaston Bird. She basically wrote a book all about like history of women in audio. She interviews a bunch of people in it. I'm excited to read it. It's kind of like one of the first books I ever have seen wrote only on the women in audio. So that'll be just a really cool thing to check out.
Yeah, especially in games, you find women even less represented, which is super sad. Women, people of color, gender, sexual minority, it's like, it's a shame. And we're telling stories, right? And I feel like it's important for people like that to understand, like, you can do this, you can be in this career, and your voices need to be heard too. So that's important just for diversity, and audio is huge and something that we desperately need. So please do not be shy.
Yeah, definitely don't be shy. That's one thing I always strive for, especially in the last few years of diversity, whether it's, you know, whether it's females or people of color. That's just one thing I would love to see. It's such a male-dominated industry. It's almost like the good boys of sorts, and is a closed community only for them. It's not, it really should open up more.
Agreed, definitely. Well, we're gonna transition now to a time of Q&A. We've got a little bit of extra time here. I want to make sure we can get some of the audience questions in. So Jessica and I will turn over to Chaka to introduce some of the students and their questions.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. This is absolutely fantastic. So I'm just going to go down the lines in our Q&A. We have an anonymous attendee that would like to ask our panelists, what is your method for storage in organizing huge data? Do you use specific program software or apps?
At work, we use a SAN, and then we backed up to LTO tapes. At home, I still freelance a lot. I just use a Western Digital cloud-based type of server where I back things up, and then I also have that backed up on internal hard drives just in case, and that's actually located at a different location in case my home burns down. That way I have backups of these, so they're not all stored in the same location.
I just had a hard drive die on me with all of my sound effects, and I backed it up 2 weeks before that. So thank God I did not lose 2 terabytes of sound effects. Yeah, I don't have a very good system of that, unfortunately. I know a lot of my friends have a bunch of like hard drive JBOD setups with like 20 terabytes of just a bunch of hard drives set up. I should probably do something like that, and that's a place that I'm lacking in for sure. Especially as I record more often at 192, it adds up quick. So that's something that is important to think about as you start like building up your own personal libraries, getting boutique library sound effects that are pretty big. So definitely invest in a couple terabytes of hard drives, and have good advice I heard is to buy, if you're going to buy one that's like a 4 terabyte, buy two terabytes instead and mirror it. Because that way, if one of them goes down, you have a backup. So always buy 2 when you're buying hard drives.
Personally, I have 3 hard drives that I like cycle through. Basically, one is my sole like sound effects library, one is my past work, and then my last one is my work in progress, because I'm usually bringing that everywhere, and if I drop that, if I damage it, I could just lose a whole library in that. So usually I have copies of all of those in a fireproof safe. And I would say I back up probably like once a month. I would say I try to at least, or once a project is done, I will try to immediately like back that up and cycle it out. But for, I guess, sending files, I love, depending on if it's a freelance work, if it's like, you know, content that is for, you can't, you know, use, I guess, like for TV and film, like I wouldn't be using WeTransfer, but WeTransfer is a great asset. I believe students get a free year of it, so that's great because it's 20 gigs that you can transfer between you and whoever you're working with. So that's a really nice asset to use. And Google Drive is one. Dropbox, those are some good ones for if you're just working on independent and freelance stuff that isn't too sensitive to send that way and then not encrypted.
Thank you so much. We have a question. We have 2 questions specifically for Paxson. Currently, I'm working on teaching myself Fmod and WYs in addition to getting more familiar with Unreal and Unity. Would you suggest working on both or just focusing on WYs?
Awesome. I can actually see the chat too. Hi, Philip. In answer to your question, it depends, which is not a great answer. I'm sorry. It's hard to say. It kind of depends on what you're interested in. So I find that in AAA audio, both Respawn, Microsoft, and Bungie have all used Wise. If you're going to be working on a large AAA game, Wise is definitely the way to go. I find that indies mostly use Fmod because it's cheaper to use. The licensing fees are not as expensive, and it's a little bit easier to network with Unity, I find too. But that's great also that you're learning Unity and Unreal. Unreal is huge because so many studios in AAA are using Unreal, and also in indie and like II, you're seeing stuff like Unity being used quite a bit. So you kind of have to tailor that towards what you're most interested in. If you want to do like big indie games, Fmod and Unity are great. But for AAA stuff, Wise and Unreal are the way to go for sure.
And we have another question for Paxson from Philip. What do video game companies look for in terms of resume portfolio content when looking at applicants?
Cool. So this is one where you want to have the reel like we talked about. So have a reel that's about a minute in length. A little bit more is okay. I would say up to like about a minute 20 is probably pushing on the longer side. So have your reel with your name and contact info and website, bookending it. So on the front and in the end, title cards. Have a website featuring your reel at the very top. When I go to your website, the first thing I want to see is your reel. Nothing else matters at that point, because when I'm hiring for a job, I just want to be able to quickly go on a person's website because I'm looking at hundreds of candidates and see their reel immediately. So that's 2 big things that will give you an edge, because a lot of people don't do that. One other thing too, because I've done a lot of reel reviews for people, is that they have music on their sound design reels, which is kind of a no-no in a way. I would say if you're a composer that is also a sound designer, have 2 separate reels. So you can have one reel that's specific, here's my compositions in varying styles for different titles, and then your sound design separately. The issue with that is if you combine them both, it can be distracting. And especially because in AAA, you're not going to have somebody do both music and sound. They're typically very distinct, separate roles. In indie, that's less of the case. You have sometimes composers doing more sound effects. So again, that kind of goes back to like what your target market is and knowing your market too.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Anonymous. For someone who wants to make a career change to sound design and audio, which basic courses and skills do you suggest? This is a question for all of our panelists.
Courses? I'm not sure what courses you would need to take. I don't know. I feel like this is probably something you can kind of, if you can learn online in a sense. Look at some of people's kind of tutorials on how they're creating sounds for things, and start messing with sounds yourself at that point. Some people may do better in a class format, but I feel like for me, or potentially some other people, may just look at tutorials and figure out, oh, you know, look at all these cool things so-and-so is doing using this stuff and that, whether plugins or just recording something in its raw state and it has its, you know, this unique sound already, and all you have to do is pitch shift something or whatever. You know, I think it just depends on what makes you more comfortable, if you need to take a class or not. There's definitely a lot of content online to help guide you through that, and I feel like.
Totally. I think when I first started transitioning from post-production to games, one area that I lacked was the technical side of things. So being able to implement sounds in game and stuff like that. And luckily, this might be good for Philip for a resource. And I think Columbia is actually teaching this now too. I think, James, you mentioned this, having WISE knowledge. So that's something, if you're not taught that in school, I went through Audio Kinetic's website and they have courses that teach you WISE. So it gives you a sample project. This would also be great for people that are interested in games, but don't really kind of know what the workflow is like and want to feel it out. This course is free, which is awesome. So they'll give you a sample game, and then you could just kind of build a WISE project, and they walk you through it, and they give you some sample assets of guns, and you can implement it in game, and it's cool. It's a very satisfying way to learn it, and it's free, which is awesome. And kind of related to that, I think the question is about transitioning into sound design. I never got any formal sound design training at Columbia. Like here, a lot of it was like sound editing. And for a long time, I felt like a sound editor. I never felt like a sound designer until recently, when I stepped outside of my comfort zone and started abusing plugins, which was kind of been the biggest step for me, and really taking sounds that either I recorded or library stuff and manipulating them and a great deal, or making source passes and just making like 20 minutes of source from synthesizers and different plugins and stuff like that. So sound design is something that's difficult to teach in a formal way, which is maybe why a lot of schools don't do it. I know VFS does it. I know a couple other schools do, but it's a tough thing, and it's something that you kind of have to learn just by doing it. So a lot of time spent and just messing around in DAW and making stuff, and just keep at it and keep designing stuff, and then eventually you'll be a sound designer. It's as simple as that. No, it's difficult, but yeah.
My advice, I would say, on that front would probably be a thing I like to do, like maybe once a month, is like just challenge myself by picking something out of this world, like a hover car or a machine gun or something, like just something sci-fi or just something abstract that you can't just like Google search, like hover car, that isn't already a pre-designed hover car. And then I basically will design it from scratch without using any sound effects that are labeled car or hover sound. I would build it from just making a drone sound, or making, getting a car, like maybe taking the sound of a air conditioning unit to get a hum sound of just like the car's engine. Just kind of try to push yourself creatively, because then again, that just is more stuff for your sound effects arsenal. And on top of that, more practice for you. I think a great way to also push yourself is just redesigning those projects. You know, practicing those ways would be good. What were we called? The trailers stuff. That's great.
Yeah, and like just to tack on that, like look at some of these movies or the behind the scenes stuff, the extra features and stuff. I know like I think Disney Plus had a whole like behind the scene documentary on some like on the Mandalorian and stuff like that. Just learning the stuff that what they're doing technique wise and everything and what entails in it. It's not you actually doing it, but it actually gives you ideas and everything that maybe, hey, I could try something somewhat similar to something else, and that will help you grow, become a sound designer.
I'd also like to add in, as a current student, if you're interested in sound design for film, you should definitely take Post-Production Audio 1. Even if you're not 100% sure you want to go that route, definitely just take that course because it will touch on every topic in sound design for film, such as basic ways to navigate Pro Tools, how to organize your session, making loops in music, mixing, sound design for trailers. Like it's a rigorous course for like intro people. I had a little bit of trouble in the course, but it's definitely manageable and it teaches you a lot. So for sure, take Post-Production Audio 1 for sound design for film.
Definitely. And on the audio side of things, I would highly recommend AVM 1 with Michael Coyle, as Paxson recommended. You're going to learn so much in that class about commercial sound design, but you also delve into film projects and things like that. So on the audio side of things, taking that class would be extremely valuable. And then the other class I would recommend would be, I think the name has changed. It's like Production 3, but I think it's like Applied Audio and Visual Media now. That is the class where I learned FMOD and WISE. I got to do podcasts, game design, film design, commercials, audiobooks. You kind of go through everything in that course as far as like sound design for all different realms of audio. So that's my recommendation right now. If you're like, what class should I take next?
I wish that existed when I would have taken that. That's awesome.
It's really
What you guys
a
are
great
talking
class.
about. It was.
Yeah.
Cool.
Learned everything just outside of school at that point. I'm so jealous you guys have all these classes.
Awesome.
Great. We have a question from Janie. Hi, guys. Thank you for taking time to talk with us today. I was wondering what recording devices you would recommend to someone who wants to start building their own audio library.
I got one right here. I just use a Tascam DR100, which has built-in mics on it, and you can also hook up XLR too, and it also has 1/4-inch input. You don't need to go crazy, honestly, when you're first starting out. Don't feel like you need to buy like a Sound Devices Mix Pre or anything like that. That is something you'll get to at some point. I definitely recommend something with some onboard mics and also the ability to plug mics in. That's really all you need. Because then you can expand your mic collection too. And then once you get to a point where you're like, oh, I want to record in 32-bit, then you can upgrade your recorder. But yeah, you could just start out with a Tascam or a Zoom handy recorder, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a portable recorder immediately, or even a recorder mixer or anything like that. Just record the sounds, it's going to pick it up. If you can, the one thing I look for is just being able to at least record at a high sample rate. And a lot of these recorders now do 96 at least, and that's perfectly fine. Don't have to spend $500, $600, $800 on a portable recorder. It's not necessary.
Yeah, I have a Zoom kit. I love it. And I think they also make, I remember my professor for live sound recording, Mary Mazurek, had brought in this really cool little microphone that actually plugs in straight. I think it was a Shure mic, and it was actual like an XY pair that you can plug straight into your phone and use like voice memo recordings, or maybe you download a recording app. I'm not sure how well it works, but it was really cool to see it and hear her talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go into that, the whole built-in or a microphone attachment to your phone, you can do that. And there's some really good, actually, free app recorders out there, like Voice Recorder Pro. That actually records up to 24-bit 48 if you want something like that. And, you know, if you're doing like backgrounds or anything, I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's more about, you know, it's not the high sample rate or bit rate, really. If you capture something that's recorded well at 48, it's fine. It's usable, you know, especially when it comes to backgrounds or something. You captured a really great, you know, atmosphere within a city or as a train's going by. You know, it's great to have it at 96 or 192, but, you know, if you're working in film or even in video games, I mean, 48 is pretty much the standard right now until it moves up to a 96 at some point.
Totally. Another thing too is not spending a lot on mics. I got these today, actually. These are the Loam Uzi Pros.
Oh,
These
I'm
are
so
great.
jealous.
They're awesome. They're only like $120. You get two. They're Omnis. They're super sensitive too, so they're designed for recording like ice or like very fine granular type stuff. They're awesome. So these just plug in XLR stereo. They're sweet. So yeah. You don't need to spend a lot on mics either. You don't have to get like an MKH 8000 or anything super, like even 416s. You'll get there. I don't even have that stuff at this point because I'm not recording enough. You know, a lot of times you are stuck using library sounds, which isn't as fun. So if you can record some stuff in your own libraries and get some boutique libraries, I think that's a great place to kind of get started and stuff.
Yeah, and one thing about recording your own source material, which is great, but you also have to realize the time it takes to record it. And then you have to master and clean it up and everything. That's a lot of time. And in this industry, time is money too. Unless you have an infinite amount of time, then that's fine. Build that library up, you know.
Funny little story kind of on that note about time recording. We spent so long on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order to get design and code to support having foliage, you know, like when you're walking through an environment and you bump into a bush. We got that finally in the last 6 months of the project, but we were so busy, we didn't have time to record any foliage. So we just used library sounds. But yeah, we were fighting for this for months and then we finally got it and we couldn't even record stuff ourselves. So record stuff when you're not busy. Record stuff when you have free time because you never know when you might need it.
Those are really good tips and tricks and information there, guys. Thank you so much for all of that.
Awesome. We have a question from Ethan. What have you found are some of the unique challenges that come from working with mixing cinematic sound in game/animation?
Well, I don't know. I'll jump in a little on some of the cinematic, because I know like cinematic sounds for game audio has changed a bit too, because now you can actually, there's implementation in that too within just the game engines. But like, I think it just depends on the style. Like when it comes to cinematic sounds, at times it can be big and bold, but you know, also like know where points where you can have a low moment, so everything isn't in your face, because you have that moment of low for like even a second, and then the impacts and the whooshes or whatever else comes back, it has a larger impact on the viewer itself because of that moment of a break. You know, trailers are, you know, kind of like, in essence, it goes 0 to 60 nonstop at you with trailers, you know, and it's loud at times, you know, and, you know, when it comes to cinematic sounds, you can have that moment. There's that potentially, there's that free moment. And you got to find that where that break is, and then have, even though it's a break, you can design something for it, but it just doesn't need to be high impact stuff constantly.
I think as a, for a mix point too, knowing your noise floor, because especially with dialogue, if you can take out some of that, that is just useless frequencies sometimes that like will just keep adding up and just make your overall mix super loud and noisy. So maybe like I got RX advanced when I graduated because I knew I would need it. I do a lot of dialogue editing and it's a really great plugin. But just like being aware of like, oh, there's a fan in this room, and if you can't take it out, like how can you use an EQ to take it out or different plugins to kind of manipulate it?
I can answer that. I've pre-mixed a little bit of stuff in game, so using something like Wise to mix assets in the context of a mix for a game. I can probably answer a better, in a way, as far as mixing individual assets for games. So when creating sound effects, one of the issues I had at the beginning was making stuff super noisy without kind of getting the whole scope of things like, okay, how often is this going to be playing in the world? You know, how often is this going to be featured in the context of a mixed? And the answer with games is probably quite a bit. So the issue I had at first was a lot of my assets were super heavy noise-based stuff and didn't have a lot of tonality, which gets super fatiguing after a while. Noise is really exciting just by nature in very short bursts, but if it's over a long period of time, your ears get super fatigued. So that's something that I think when you're mixing individual assets for a game or even for a film or something, is, you know, keep in mind the ears of the person listening to it, and does this need to be super overpowered noisy thing, or can it be more subtle and tonal? And in general, I think tonal stuff is more pleasing to our ears, and it can kind of, it takes up less space in a mix if you have tonal stuff stacked on top of each other. That relationship is going to be much more manageable mixing in the context of a project rather than a bunch of noisy stuff stacked.
Thank you. Speaking of EQ plugins, Anonymous would like to know what your go-tos are for EQ plugins.
I got this pretty inexpensive one. I think it's through Waves. It's called Waves F6. And the reason why I got it is because it had like you can see, it had like a spectrograph in it that you can actually see the frequencies while you're adjusting it. So that was kind of really cool. It was really inexpensive. I think I paid like $30 for it at the time. I don't know if it was on sale. That's a good one. But honestly, like the one that comes in Pro Tools is not bad if you just want to go really cheap route. Like it's a good way to practice for sure.
Yeah, I still use the at work. I still use the Pro Tools EQ a lot actually. But if I have to get a third-party one, I probably get Fat Filter's Q3. I like it for the aspect. It's more of a surgical EQ, just because the how the Q works and the amount of bands you have and everything. So I think there are different styles of EQs, and it just depends on what do you need it for. Like, you know, outside of the Fat Filter, I'll constantly just use the Pro Tools because that's all I need, you know.
I did like Pro Tools EQ a lot. I'm with John. If Desert Island EQ plugin, it's Fab Pro Q3. That is the one I use on pretty much everything. The issue with that is it's kind of expensive. It's like $180, I think, which kind of goes back into us telling you not to spend money. So to not be hypocritical, I will say Reaper's EQ is just fine. Like it's very similar in that you have the spectrograph, and it's free too. I mean, it's built in with the software as stock. So yeah, but when you get to a point, I think Pro Q3 is a great first plugin to buy. If you are going to spend money for something, Pro Q will go a long way, because you have the ability now is when you're EQing things to also set up a multiband, so that it can also like function as a multiband compressor on your EQ bands. So then you basically like two plugins in one. Then you now also have a multiband compressor that's frequency dependent, which is cool.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Anonymous. What in-home equipment do you recommend to work on? And the Anonymous noted Brielle's setup in the back.
Well, honestly, I do a lot of my like freelance work. I start with headphone mixing. It's just, you're gonna hear all of the noise floor that is in whatever sound effects that you might be pulling in. Especially, it's crucial for dialogue editing. So I have Sennheiser's 280 Pros, I believe. I like them a lot. They're comfortable. That's another thing. Like, you want something that's not gonna like hurt your ears because you're probably gonna be wearing them for a couple hours, so you don't want to fatigue yourself. And then I have the Yamaha HS8s. That was like the first monitors that I bought when I moved. I like them. They're nice.
Yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of money with gear. You Focusrite, you know, their IOs are fairly cheap, and a lot of times, you know, all you need is stereo and get headphones like Brielle, you know, because in the end, like if you're just designing stuff or even mixing to an extent, you know, it's probably better to do it on your headphones versus say if you got some speakers, just because of the room you're in potentially of it's not being acoustically sound, where there's a lot of reflection going on or the noise going on in the street or something like that. At that point, you know, getting a decent headphone is perfect. You know, I wear headphones. Excuse me, I wear headphones a lot. You know, I like my Biodynamics. What are they? The 770s, I believe. They're very comfortable. I could wear them for hours without it feeling like, you know, someone's squeezing my head. So, you know, I definitely think, you know, you can get like I said, a 2i, was it the 2i2 or whatever? Those are fine. You know, something cheap and just get some decent headphones and, you know, get to work on whatever DAW you have.
I think that's a great note too, is that you don't need like a fully treated room or a super expensive monitoring setup to do good work. And that was another thing that I thought was a super high barrier of entry when I first started too. As it turns out, all of the work I did on Halo and on Destiny, these bad boys, $100 HD 280 headphones. I mean, they do, yeah, they're great. They're awesome. And anything, I would say, any headphone that you know really well and you know translates to another speaker system. And that's key, because if you were to throw me in another pair of headphones, my mixes would probably not be the same. And it would take just a small learning curve to kind of adjust to frequency response and stuff like that. But yeah, you can get away with doing great work on headphones. You don't need to have a 5.1 setup unless you're doing 5.1 mixes and stuff like that. But yeah, for just general sound design purposes, you can get away with just stereo headphones.
All right. Well, that's an awesome question to close on. Hey, everybody. I'm back.
Hey.
I really want to thank Paxson, John, Brielle. You guys are absolutely amazing.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. James and Jessica, they did. I just want to also give it up for our student hosts. They did an amazing amount of prep to ask the kind of questions that they thought our students and alums would get the most benefit out of. I just want to thank everybody in the audience for attending. I put some links in the chat for you. We would love to know what you thought of careers in sound design, so please fill out a survey evaluation. Please follow us on Instagram, plug. Real quick, would any of our panelists or hosts like to plug anything?
Good plug. Sure. Why not? I am on Twitter, and occasionally I like to do reel reviews. I'm a little slammed right now because we're closing out Destiny release, but if you follow me on Twitter, probably in the next couple of weeks or so, I'm going to post and say if you'd like to send me your reels for review. Happy to listen to your reel, check out your website, give you kind of focused feedback of areas that if you're applying for a job, especially in games, where places that you could work on and stuff like that. So happy to help anytime. Shoot me a follow. It's Paxson H on Twitter.
You can message me on Facebook. My name is Brielle Achterhoff, and hopefully it will be presented so you can spell that. It's a little hard to spell. But yeah, feel free to message me on there. I actually also I'm like a moderator on the audio arts and acoustics. Like, we have like a private Facebook group that so many people are on, and you can definitely send your invite, and we always accept people, but a lot of people just kind of, it's just like a community where we just talk about plugins, or maybe like, I posted this event the other day, people post questions they have, but it's a great resource that you should definitely check out.
Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm at Be Like Sound, BELIKESOUND. Sorry, I just read this Bruce Lee Alive, and he talks about sound and how, or he talks about water and how it just molds and blends to anything, and I feel like that's what sound is, and I got really inspired by this book. But yeah, DM me any resumes or links you wanted me to take a look at. I'm more than happy to. I've done that in the past with a few people, and they seem to appreciate the input.
Awesome. And for those of you who sent resumes to me in preparation for this event, we will be passing them forward to our panelists. So please check your email for that. Also, we have a number of events. Actually, James and Jessica, do you have anything you want to plug? You never know who's watching.
I have a plug.
Yes. What would you like to plug, James?
So here, I'll just send it. So if you can follow at Playback Play Forward on Instagram, myself and about a dozen other students are going to be releasing a album that we've done over the summer called Playback Play Forward. It'll be volume 1 of 2, and it's all for charity. We are donating 100% of the proceeds to Music Cares to support artists that are struggling due to COVID-19 things. And so what we've done is we've recorded original covers of songs from the public domain, and we put this album together to be hope-filled encouragement for students, alum, for anybody. We're looking at maybe a month or so for that to get released. So follow us on Instagram for updates.
That's an amazing, amazing project. Shout out to Tom Joyce,
Yes,
who is
Tom
our
is
audio advisor, bringing that all together. Amazing work. How about you, Jessica?
You guys can add me on my Facebook account if you just search up my full name. And if you have any questions about being a student at Columbia currently, or questions about the audio suite, you can always DM me and ask me those questions.
Thank you, Jessica, because we do have some brand new freshmen in the audience right now. So, and thank you all for attending and getting connected. I want to also drop a couple of other events in the chat. So next week, you can get your act together. We have 2 acting related programs. If you are for on-camera talent and you want to learn how to put together a self-tape, that's what we're doing on the 5th. And on the 6th, we have virtual casting masterclass with Sarah Clark of Compass Casting. This is crucial, particularly for you film students that are working on thesis films and you're trying to figure out how to cast during COVID. One of the COVID safety precautions is remote casting, so you don't want to miss that. But thank you so much for coming. And I hope you all have an amazing evening. Thank you, James, Jessica, John, Paxson, and Brielle. You guys are fantastic. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
Absolutely. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace.